Hello and welcome. We're about to get started, just kind of waiting to see if we get more participants, although it's kind of held steady. So I think it might be about time for us to get going. My name is Aurora Jacobson. I work at the Stillwater Public Library. Welcome to this drone class. A reminder, as you can see from the screen, if you can keep your audio and video off for this program, that will allow us to share the video in more places after this program. So if you can keep those off, that would be great. You can submit any questions to the chat and I'll make sure to try to ask those questions later in the program. We're gonna have Greg Schultz from Pictures Over Stillwater give a presentation. Begin with a short video from Greg's drone. Thank you.
And we are live here at the Stillwater Library. Hello, everybody. I am Greg Schultz from Pictures Over Stillwater, and I'm here with a couple of friends. We just came in the room here with Tina. Tina is a tiny little drone, a DJI Mavic Mini. Let me get Tina turned off here. And we are here to talk about drones and drones from recreation and beyond. So I can mention here, I'm here with some friends. I have Tina here, and Tina looks kind of funny because what I've got on here are prop guards. These little prop guards are little safety measures that allow you to do things like fly inside carefully and not crash. Prop guards are like training wheels. The good news is you won't tip over. The bad news is they're like training wheels and they're not as maneuverable as what you might have otherwise. But this is a nice little portable, small, compact drone that you can do quite a bit with. Get some nice pictures and fly it indoors and outdoors, as we just saw with our little arrival there. But I've got some other ones here. A common question I run into, which is, what are some different kinds of drones? Well, that's why I've got some different examples here that we'll go through, and we'll go into some questions and some different things here. I got to turn my little controller off here. And as I flew in, I was actually controlling this. My display, my app is actually on the phone here. And these are my little controls as we've got going here. Anyway, as mentioned, I am Greg Schultz from Pictures Over Stillwater. And I am a licensed commercial drone operator. I'm both federal FAA licensed and also licensed in the state of Minnesota. Minnesota is one of the few states. All my drones that are here that I've shown are all registered with the FAA as you need to do. And what we're going to do over the next 45 minutes or so is just walk through some different material, give you some of the basics, some things maybe you know about already. We'll refresh some things like that. Maybe give you some new information and questions. We've got several questions that people already have submitted, others that we know, common ones, and put those questions in. Great. If you've got a drone, congratulations. Maybe you're looking to do something more with it. Maybe you're looking to upgrade. Maybe you're looking to do something new or different. Likewise, maybe you had a drone and that drone flew away and it went bye-bye in the wind or something. So it's good to see where a lot of people responding that they've got drones or they're looking at things, stuff like that. So I've got some slides here that we're just going to kind of run through as a little bit of a backdrop, that if we can put that up on the screen, that'll just help give us a little bit of organization. So there's our intro slide. We saw the video that went along with that, which happens to be the view from right above the Stillwater Library here on a nice afternoon. Why don't we go ahead and move to the next slide there. And one of the common things about drones, so you hear a lot about them. There's the good, the bad, the ugly. And when it comes to drones, one of my thoughts, one of my beliefs is that while there's some bad implementations and there's some vendors that may or may not be so good and products per se, that generally it's not the drones that are bad per se, other than products, etc. It's how they get used or how they get abused, and that's what ends up in the news. And there's initiatives out there. For example, the FAA has one around education, similar to what we're doing tonight, just awareness. And hence you'll see the hashtag sometimes, Dronesforgood or Drone Good, or things like that, is to generate that awareness, that interest that, yeah, it's not all bad things you hear about or read about or that are being done with them. There's a lot that can be done with them. And we've got some examples here on the screen. Certainly photography and video, including 360-degree images still in video. Things like FPV or first-person view. In other words, what you see through a display or what you see through goggles. There's a whole part of the drone industry that's all about doing high-speed racing, aerobatics. There's a picture there on the top right of a racing course. And I've tried it. The goggles, it's not my thing, but it really is interesting to see and do. Likewise, some of the FPV pilots I've talked with is they like doing the FPV thing where they're like a virtual reality as opposed to flying and actually seeing what's going on. So it's to each his own. And that's part of the wide world of drones. There are so many different aspects. So I mentioned photography, I mentioned videography, racing, aerobatics. There's another area that ties into photography video, which is called photogrammetry, 3D modeling, mapping, imaging, taking pictures to compute the volume of a stockpile of rocks, of gravel, dirt, things like that. Creating a three-dimensional model of something. So in fact, on your screen there, if you look over in that lower right, there's a picture that's a three-dimensional model of the Veterans Memorial over by the Washington County Old Courthouse there. And that's actually via a series of pictures taken in a given area in a given programmed way that then you load it into the software and you create that virtual view. Another is thermography, infrared, IR, what some call FLIR, which is in the extreme lower right there, which is looking at infrared. Whether it's using infrared for looking at a roof, doing roof inspections, you got energy leak, you have water problems, things like that, or looking for things that are out in the woods, stuff like that. So certainly recreational, hobbyists, just for fun, the fun of flying, doing selfies are really popular, but also for education. Even right here in the Stillwater School District, there's a lot going on in the STEM programs that they're using drones in the schools, not just in the high schools, but even down in the middle schools doing different things. Popular with governments, whether it be for security, search and rescue, engineering, land management, survey, things like that. Also for commercial, construction, real estate, inspection, survey, agriculture, the wide world of drones. There's so many different things that you can do with it. That's part of why I've got all these different friends with me, is I use them for different things, different purposes. So with that, why don't we go ahead, and what I use with my drones is for commercial work. I use different drones for different things. For bigger projects where I've got to be covering very large acreage, I use this larger one that's here in the background. This is Oscar. It's noisier, it's louder, it's more powerful, but it's got a bigger camera, but I can fly it further and still see it. Another popular one that I have here is Maddie, which is a DJI Mavic Pro, kind of an in-between. And then there's Tina, which I showed you a little bit earlier, brought into the room, flew it in. And Tina gets used a lot. It's like carrying a camera around. You have a camera, you want to carry it around, get that quick shot. And that's what I use Tina for, is I want to just carry it with me. I carry Tina around in a small case like this. I've got extra spare parts, batteries and things like that. So it's hardened. And I've got lights on it so I can fly it at night legally. I'll use it for doing projects where I need to get in close, for flying inside, flying in factories, flying indoors, but also good enough where I can fly it outside in different conditions. So I do a lot of different things. I do photography, I do video, I do photogrammetry, thermography for several different industries, several different sectors. All right, why don't we move on here? And so here are some examples of what I do taking pictures. You saw some video earlier, but here are some pictures. Hopefully some of these are familiar. And for example, we got the renovated Stillwater lift bridge there in the top left. Top middle is the old Washington County Courthouse and the Veterans Memorial on Memorial Day weekend this year. Top right, that is the parade through downtown Stillwater for the class of 2020 high school graduation parade. So we've got footage of that. We've also got video of the parade. So those are just some of the examples. And then also some different sites from around town. You can go ahead and jump to the next slide. All right. So the question that comes up is, what type of drone should you get? What kind of drone do you have? Well, it all comes down to, what is it that you want to do? The wide world of drones. There are many different kinds, many different types, many different styles. What can you afford? What are you looking to do with it? Do you have preferences, or what is it that you want to do? That's what it really comes down to. How much money you want to spend. I tell people, how much are you willing to lose? Okay, because there is a good probability is if you just take it out of the box, plug it in, you might do okay. You might run into some issues right away. And that's where time to read some of the warnings, some of the instructions. Like if it's storming out, if you've got high winds, if it's snowing, different things like that. There's some things, great little tips that'll say, don't do this, don't do that, because it's helping you to keep your drone so it doesn't go and disappear on you. But there's a lot of different options here. There's price, there's the size, type of camera. So if you're going to be doing photography and video, what kind of camera do you need? Do you need a camera that just does 1K high definition, or do you need 2K, 4K, 8K? Do you need a camera that can do 14 or 24 or 40 megapixels? What are you looking to do? Are you looking to do action shots where you need really high frame rates, or just nice still images? What sort of automation do you want? Do you want it where the aircraft takes off, flies around, lands, and you really don't have to do anything but watch? Do you want it to do where, do you want it to be able to have like obstacle avoidance? So as it's flying along and it runs into something, that it'll stop, it'll make an adjustment and then correct itself. So there's a lot of different things, a lot of different considerations. Performance. Do you want something that's really small and portable? Like Tina here is very, very small when you don't have the prop guards on. Folds up very, very small. Or do you need something higher performance, but that's going to be bigger? How much portability do you want? Something that'll fit in a backpack? Like here, Maddie here is folded up, and Tina is about half the size of Maddie. When it comes back to what are you going to do? How are you going to use it? How much do you want to spend? You can get into something pretty middle of the road, $400 or $500. You can find some things even lower than that, down around $100 that are nice for flying indoors. But if you want some automation on it, obstacle avoidance, different things like that, you're going to be more up in that $400, $500, $600, $700, $800 range. Likewise, there's some kits that you can, some are optimized for racing, for FPV. There are do-it-yourself where you build the kit, you optimize them, customize them, like a lot of things, as well as turnkey. You just get the product and it's ready to go, do some initial setup, read those instructions that they're there for a reason. So there's a lot of different ones, a lot of different capability, and usually the thing that's going to be that barrier is going to be price. How much are you willing to spend? Anyway, so on the screen here, there's some different examples. DJI, probably the market leader just in terms of how many products they actually ship, how many they sell, has a whole different range of models that are anywhere from a couple $100 from like the Tilo, which are nice for if you're going to be programming them, things like that, to the Spark, the Mavic Air, the Mavic Mini, the bigger Mavics, the Phantoms, all the way up, start getting into thousands of dollars in different. An up-and-comer is a company, a brand called Scadio, and great automation, obstacle avoidance, turn them on, they'll fly, they'll follow around, do a lot of things. But again, you're at that doorstep of around $1,000, give or take. And what I should also mention is that's just for the drone. Some of them include the controllers, but you may have to actually add a la carte. What are you going to have for controller? What are you going to have for display? So a lot of different options there. Some other ones, vendors, you've got Parrot, you've got Bebop, and many, many different others. So a lot of different options there. It comes back to what is it that you're looking to do. I should mention here, logistic, is that this session is being recorded. So you can go back, and this will be available, so you can go back to a point in time and say, what was he saying there, and go back and see what was actually on the slides there. So there's a little tip there. A couple other things I'll point out real quickly is that most drones today do have cameras built in. Most of them are turnkey. They do have a lot of standard functionality, but that's where you want to look to see what the differences are. Some are fixed wing, which means that they literally have wings so they can fly around. Some are rotor, some are single, some are dual, some are quads. All these that I have right here are quads. Not all drones are quads. A quad doesn't have to mean is the only type of drone. There's a lot of different ones out there, but quads are popular because they can hover. But there's also octa, hex with anywhere from 6, 8, or more engines and props on them. So again, it comes down to money. All right, this might be a good point is, we'll advance the next slide, but why don't we do some, work some questions in here real quick. And we're waiting for the questions to come in. Just here's some more images here, some examples.
So some of the questions so far are, I mean, you covered some of this. Are there any specific drones that you would mention for good quality video or stills, especially affordable ones?
Yeah, I like the DJI Mavic Mini. The only knock I have on it is it doesn't have the obstacle avoidance capabilities that you get if you move up into that $800–900 type range. So if you move up into the bigger Mavics, the Mavic Airs, the Skydios, things like that, or even the Evotels. That's the only knock that I have on the Mavic Mini. This Mavic Mini has a 2.7K camera for video, which is not bad, or just shoot at regular high def 1K. So this is a really good price performer, the Mavic Mini. But move up, if you really want to move up, then get yourself into like a Skydio, the Autotel, the Evo Autotels, a DJI Mavic Mini or something like that. But it's kind of like getting a regular camera. How big of a camera, how much do you need, are you looking to spend based on what you want to do? So good question, very, very common question. It's not all black and white.
And I will say that someone had a question about where some of the source, like what some of the images that you've posted are from. I did post in the chat the pictures over Stillwater, which you do have on the, is there any other place, any other any other way that people can find out what?
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah. All these are pictures that I've taken, or in the case of the videos, and where you can see them is on picturesoverstillwater.com. That's my website. You can also go to Facebook, and my Facebook page is Pictures Over Stillwater, or you can go to Instagram, and it's Pictures Over Stillwater on Instagram as well. And I also am on Twitter. On Twitter, it's PO Stillwater, kind of shortened for Pictures Over Stillwater, but Twitter is PO Stillwater, or my other Twitter account is StorageIO. So on any of those, you can see them, and then you'll see images that will also pop up elsewhere. I've got videos on Vimeo, and take a guess what it is on Vimeo. Pictures Over Stillwater. We've got a YouTube channel, Pictures Over Stillwater. And you've got a virtual store, an online store, picturesoverstillwater.smugmug.com. So you see a common theme here?
So we also have questions about the how far the longest drone can fly and how fast the fastest drone is. Okay,
these are, it's a two-part answer. There is what can be technically done with them and what you can actually do legally. Legally, you have to stay under 100 miles an hour, which is pretty darn fast. Most of them are going to be in the 20, 30, 40 mile an hour, which is fast. That's moving. But you have to stay, legally, you have to stay under 100 miles an hour to be in the commercial recreational realm. How far can they go? Okay, another two-part answer. Technically, they will fly out miles. Tina, the Mavic Mini, is not going to fly as far as these other ones will. But Tina can easily get out, probably out around a mile or so before you'll have connectivity issues. All of mine are equipped with high intensity lights, meaning that I can see them at night out to 3 miles, which means I can fly them to 3 miles. So this is the two-part. They will fly out several miles. You're restricted to how far you can actually see them, not through your display, but what you can actually see them. So if you can see them at a quarter mile away, that's how far you can fly it. If you can see it a mile away, actually see it, or have a visual observer who can actually see it, then you can fly out a mile. So the rule is you can fly them as far as you can see. If you can't see it, you're probably too far. Let's see. We got some other questions there, it looks like.
Yeah, we're starting to get some of the air traffic control FAA questions. And I know that you were planning on talking about some of those already. Do you want me to ask them as specific questions, or do you want to?
Let's, yeah, that's a good one. And then we'll jump into that here a little bit more in a moment. There's two parts to it. It's like an automobile. With an automobile, you have a driver's license, which is a license to be able to operate a vehicle. It doesn't have to be your vehicle. It could be somebody else's. But that is your license, your certificate to operate a vehicle. And then you can get extra things to that for like driving a big truck or driving a motorcycle, different add-ons to that. Same thing with the drone is for recreational, you don't need anything for just flying recreational for hobby. But if you're going to do something commercial, if you're going to receive some sort of benefit, whether it's money or freebies or whatever, but some benefit for doing some flying, some work, then you need to do commercial. And to commercial, you need to be licensed by the FAA or certified by the FAA as a commercial drone pilot. In Minnesota, there's an additional requirement that if you're doing commercial work for third parties, for other people, you also have to have a Minnesota license. So what this all comes back to is you need to have the equivalent of a driver's license for commercial today around the country and additional in Minnesota. There's not a test yet for recreational. It's coming. It's going to happen. It'll be pretty straightforward. Countries like United Kingdom already have it. It's actually pretty easy to get. I passed the test. And then your aircraft, your drones also need to be registered. It's $5 for 3 years per aircraft, which is pretty good. Is there such a thing as drone ground school? Absolutely. So we're kind of doing this overview, big picture tonight, but we also do classes with community education with Stillwater area public schools, where we do a series, Drones for Non-Dummies, the basics, beyond the basics, aerial photography, and also do that with other community education school districts, Anoka, Hennepin, among others. And for those who also want to do extra, we also do coaching, training, getting you ready for the test, and go out and Google it. You'll also find lots of other school options out there. So anyway, you've seen some different pictures here. These are all around the Stillwater area. The one on the top left, that's above the Water Street Inn during the Twinkle Parade Christmas tree lighting party this past December. Towards the middle top left, that's when I got photobombed by a bunch of birds this winter near the Stillwater Bridge. Those birds were not photoshopped in. They actually came up. As they're coming up, I'm pulling back away to get out of their way. There's an example doing some real estate pictures on that top row. Far right, that's a picture of the I-94 during the 9/11 parade, and then various other pictures from around the valley. A common question I get is, do I ever get attacked by birds? I've got a lot of close calls. You see some examples there where I've been photobombed. Over in the lower left, that's an early morning spring picture as I'm flying the aircraft, the drone, towards downtown Stillwater, and a goose just came around and flew right in front of me. The video is actually pretty cool, where I got photobombed. So there's some nice shots in the evening. Pony Stadium lit up in the lower right, downtown Stillwater at night. Here's something I'll tell you. One of the neat things is that when we're several miles away from downtown Minneapolis, is when you get up at, if you put the aircraft, the drone up to about 350 some feet, you can see the Minneapolis skyline from here in Stillwater. And depending on where you're at, you get different sort of views. All right. All right, let's move on to our next one here. All right, so The question came up, and it's kind of that segue about, yeah, you have to be, you know, if you're going to be doing commercial, get your registration, get your license, etc. There's some things you need to be aware of, okay? Because you're on the ground, but your aircraft is going to be up in the air. The FAA manages, controls the air. I'm not going to say they own the air, but the FAA, the Federal Aviation Administration, part of the Department of Transportation, manages, controls the air outside, okay? So that's one part of the equation, is there are certain areas where the airspace is closed at different altitudes. Around airports is a good example. Some other areas that have airspace restriction controls can be things like prisons. And there's different rules, different regulations that are either in effect or about to go into effect. One of the big no-nos is do not fly over a prison. If you fly over a prison, you may become a guest of that establishment. So don't fly over prisons. Don't do it. It's not a good thing. There's different laws that come into effect. Likewise, stay away from power plants. Not a good idea. But what I'm showing you here on this chart, and again, a reminder, this is recorded, so you can come back and look at this. Here in Washington County in the Stillwater general area, the East Metro, this is a ground map. So this is showing you on the ground of some places that you can't fly or you need to be careful of. And this is where I said it's a two-part. There's restrictions on up in the air, how high you can go, which you're limited to go to 400 feet or whatever the posted airspace is under 400 feet. So you can go up to 400 unless it's lower. What you have to watch out for is there's areas that are no-fly zones that are restricted. For example, national parks are generally no-fly zones. And here's the catch. Some of the national parks actually do have airspace restrictions where the FAA, the Park Service, have put restrictions on the airspace, limiting even airplanes flying in certain areas. But the key one with national parks is that you cannot land, you cannot take off, you cannot be in the national park flying the drone, okay? You can argue that, well, the airspace is open, yeah, but it comes back to the other part of the equation. Where are your feet? Where are you standing to send the aircraft up in the air, to bring it back down, land it, to control it from? So what that means is your feet. And if you think about it, well, you'll just play the game of, well, I'll go out in a boat in a national park. No, it also applies to the water. So the restrictions on national parks are that you can't be on the park property flying. That's the ground or the water or a boat in the park. And the similar holds true with Minnesota and many other state parks where there's restrictions on it. So in this map here, you see a squiggly line along the St. Croix. Well, that has to do with the National Park Service going in and flying from those properties. You see a state park, William O'Brien up by Marine. That's a state park. State parks are also no-fly zones. Doesn't mean you can't fly over them. You just can't be in the park flying. That's a DNR limitation. State forests in Minnesota, it's a different story. So you need to be aware and check with, if you're going somewhere, what are the local rules? What are the local regulations? Are you allowed to fly there or not? A couple other ones is up by Square Lake and Pine Point Park. Those are Washington County parks. Washington County parks are also no-fly zones. And again, the key thing there is those parks, it's where your feet are. So if you drive up, you pull up, you get out of your car, well, you're in the park, that's a no-fly zone. Different city parks, it varies. There's no restrictions that I'm aware of, for example, in Stillwater. But if you go into Minneapolis, over to St. Paul, some other municipalities around town, there are restrictions. There are on where you can fly, things like that. Afton State Park, there's another one where, yeah, you could be up in the air, you could fly over it. Somebody might harass you about it. But as long as you're not standing on the park property and flying it, that's where the real limitations are. And what it comes back to is a lot of common sense. Just have some common sense. Are you flying around and buzzing and bothering other people? I was out in on the St. Croix last weekend, I think it was, and also I looked up and yep, there goes a drone zipping by. And from where they were flying it, they had to be in the park somewhere. Anyway, so this is where it comes back to a little bit about the air, which is controlled by the FAA, and then on the ground standpoint. And one of the acronyms I'm going to tell you and mention to you is something called a TFR, a temporary flight restrictions. And these actually happen in the Minneapolis area on a regular basis. One of them are the recurring ones. So before if the baseball were in season, there's a ongoing several hours before Twins game, TFR, so many miles around the target field. Same thing with Xcel Energy Center when the Wild are playing, US Bank Stadium, the Gopher Stadiums, that there's the airspace is closed, particularly for drones, up to a certain altitude so that they're not flying around people. Flying above people, flying right over people is one of the big no-nos. And you say, well, geez, a hockey game, why do they have to put it for Xcel for a hockey game? Real simple. People are coming and going. So for a couple hours before, as people go in till shortly after the game, that airspace closes down. So you need to pay attention to that during certain events. So when the protest riots were taking place, parts of the Minneapolis airspace were closed down to several thousand feet. So in other words, you had to be several thousand feet up in the air to be able to fly around. That's how the helicopters and the news crews were able to do it. If you were below a couple thousand feet, that was a no-fly zone. You couldn't fly in there to get in the way of certain things. Another TFR that comes into place is when VIPs, the president, vice president, certain other people come into a town, the airspace will close down for a certain period of time in certain areas. An example of that, I think it's this week, Green Bay and Milwaukee actually have a couple of those going on. So anyway, that's a little bit about some of the things to be aware of. And there's some great apps out there. Before You Fly, Air Map, UAV Forecast, they'll tell you that the apps are really good about saying, you shouldn't fly here, be aware of this, watch out for that, check the apps. All right, if we can move on. And if we got some more questions, we can work those in as well.
Yeah, one of the questions was specifically, what happens if your drone ends up on somebody else's property for various reasons? What would be the proper way to deal with your drone, say, landing in a neighbor's yard?
Be apologetic, be nice, and hopefully that it's something that your neighbor is not going to be too upset about. Don't give them a reason to become even more upset or do something. Try to recover it in a way that doesn't cause escalation. How's that? There should be a follow-up to that question. I'm waiting to see.
There is a follow-up question. Sorry, I got stuck on not unmuting. So if your apologies go nowhere, is there a particular law enforcement branch that can deal with?
So if you weren't doing anything nefarious, you're out flying and oh, sorry about that. Sorry about that. Yeah, if you're just out flying and your battery's going low, you're doing everything you should be. It just that you had to put it down for an emergency. And if that neighbor they took it, they're not going to let you have it. Call the police, call the sheriff, and just tell them what happened. File a report. And if that neighbor still doesn't want to give it back, and this, especially if you haven't done anything wrong. You haven't done anything wrong. You haven't been flying over them and stalking them and doing nefarious type things. Call the police, call the sheriff, tell them what happened, tell them your situation, tell them you'd like to file a report, and they might be able to advise you or have a conversation with that person. Now, this is where it can get dicey, is that if you've been flying over that person and taking pictures, and they've, for whatever reason, they've got a reason to do it, that person may also call the police, call the sheriff, whatever, and say, yeah, this person, I've got their drone, this is what's going on. But get the deputies, get the sheriffs or the police, and just work with that and work through it. Hopefully that you can work through it. You can get something going. Worst case is you've got to go through some legal process to get the aircraft, get the drone back. It's one of those things where an ounce of prevention is just, be prepared. Think about when you're flying is, okay, what if I land over there? What if I have to go over there? Try to avoid problems. But there again, the question I thought that was about to pop up, maybe it is in the queue, is what if somebody is flying over your house and is always just parked over your house, and you think they're taking pictures, or they actually are taking the pictures of you or your house and putting them on Facebook? There again, call the sheriff, call the deputies, call the police. Some communities, for example, over in Hudson, Wisconsin, actually have a law that if there's an aircraft, a drone hovering stationary over your backyard, and you can give the police the information, they can find out who's doing it, they can write them a ticket. They got a law on the books. Stillwater hasn't gotten that far, I don't believe yet, but they might have something like public nuisance or different things like that. So the police have become more educated. They are more aware. You can leverage them. The question that then comes up is, well, can you shoot a drone down? No, don't do it. Likewise, if somebody starts shooting at you, get out of there. You might want to turn your camera on, make sure your video camera is on, get out of there. And it's been happening.
You talked about not shooting drones over people. Is there any similar consideration for drones over vehicles?
Yeah. So a couple parts there. One, don't shoot at a drone. Don't, especially if it's over people. Now, that ties into something else, which is don't fly drones over people. There are some things that, for example, when I'm flying, I do a lot of events, and there's techniques where I can make it look like I'm looking right over somebody's shoulders, but I'm back up and I'm at an angle and I'm leveraging wind and doing different things where I'm not actually out over people. That's an FAA regulation, is thou shalt not fly over people, thou shalt not fly over moving vehicles, for example, moving cars. Don't fly over stadiums full of people, don't fly reckless, don't fly in airspace without authorization, some things like that. And it comes back to common sense, safety, in that if this thing loses power or is knocked out or has a problem, it's going to drop like a rock. And if the props are still spinning, somebody could get hurt, somebody could get cut, something bad could happen. So that's why it's a common sense type thing, is don't fly over people, don't fly over moving vehicles, and let somebody else get the YouTube shot that's going to get a whole bunch of likes. It's not worth it. But on the flip side, be creative. Figure out your angles. Figure out, how the wind is playing, what you can do, and you can still get those really good shots, but you can do it safely. So here are some different things. Again, you can come back and look at the replay and look at some of the do's and some of the don'ts. And really what it is just use some common sense, watch the weather, use the apps, learn more. There's some great links across the bottom there that you can go back and you can look at. for recreational flying, for even to learn more about commercial, but some basic things to keep in mind there. All right. Well, we move on, and we can work some more in here. Here is some additional resources. Again, we mentioned some classes. Pictures over stillwater.com/school. It's a page where I've got some different links to some of the different classes that we've done, we'll be doing, so you can stay aware there. A couple other resources if you want to learn more, get deeper into it. You've got a drone, you're beyond the basics. Maybe you want to take a test and get licensed. Maybe you just want to learn more. There's a couple of links there where you can go to learn more from the FAA, but also that book there. It's a fantastic book. Whether you want to take the test to become commercial or learn more so that it'll be really easy whenever the recreational test comes out, highly recommend it. It's a great book. You'll learn a lot of good info there. So we got some time for a few more questions.
So we talked about not shooting above vehicles. Can you use a drone from a vehicle or a boat?
Hey, good question. If, okay, in a non-populated area, you can fly a drone from a vehicle as long as the person flying the drone is not driving the vehicle. Okay? So if you're driving the car, you can't be flying the drone. You have to have somebody else flying the drone, somebody else driving the vehicle. Now, people say, well, geez, how about if I just put in an autonomous follow me mode? Somebody needs to be driving the vehicle, somebody needs to be operating the drone, the aircraft, and it's not the autopilot. Okay, so if you're out in a non-populated area, absolutely, you can fly from a car as long as you can see the drone and it's in a non-populated area. The same thing from a boat. Absolutely, you can fly from a boat, but I'll give you a little tip is if you set your aircraft to take off and return to home, either when the battery is low, when it loses signal, when it gets confused, keep in mind that a boat is probably drifting unless you're anchored. If you're anchored, you're going to be swinging. Is where it returns home to may not be where the boat's at. So keep that in mind that if you return to home and it's going back to where you were, it's going to get wet. Something to keep in mind.
Do you have any advice for people that are looking to introduce other groups of people into using drones? For example, a 4-H group, like how they could add in drone curriculum, or if
Absolutely.
people wanted to start a drone program? Yeah.
Absolutely. Reach out, pictures over stillwater.com, talk, and we'll chat about it. But I would absolutely add it in there, work it into the program, early to, 13, 14 on up, or even younger. Start exposing them to Dronesforgood. In other words, it's one thing to sit here glued, and I see this a lot, people are like this, and they don't know that their drone is over there, and that even though if they see something through the display, they're like this, they don't know that a bird or something else is about to fly into it. So part of it is teaching them, looking up, looking around, and staying aware, not just tunnel vision focus. And so it's a great thing to teach the kids, whether it's the operating of it, the flying, taking the pictures, flying nice and smooth and slow. Maybe their thing is virtual reality, video gaming. Maybe for them, the path is to get into FPV racing, something like that. But there's another area part of this, which is programming. In other words, where I can fly the aircraft with the controls or push a button and it'll fly certain routes. But I can also program these to fly a pattern such that it's repeatable. So like when I'm doing construction sites, progress job reports, I'm able to have the aircraft fly that same perimeter, that same pattern over and over and over repetitively. Well, part of that is setting up those programs, setting up and verifying. So it's like having to know about GPS coordinates, latitude, longitude, X, Y, waypoints, different things like that, camera angles. So there's a lot that they can learn, whether it be 4-H, whether it be in the schools. If somebody has a camera program, they should have video photography or vice versa. Looks like we're getting close on time here. Got time for a few more questions.
So what happens if you're flying a recreational drone, or you're flying a drone as a hobbyist, and you end up with a photo that you then want to sell? Does that then make you a commercial drone operator?
Great question. It comes down to what is your intent. If your intent is, I'm just going to go out and, catch the sunset, maybe get a nice sunset, and I happen to capture something. And it's something that, okay, yeah, that was good. You can sell that if that's not your regular business. If your regular business is not photography, selling pictures, selling video, anything like that, you could do that. And again, that wasn't your intent to go out and capture that sunset or something that happened during that sunset. It comes back to an intent. So in that scenario, you wouldn't have to be commercial. However, if you're repeatedly going out to capture sunsets or bridge pictures or certain things that, oh, well, I was a recreational hobby flyer. I just happened to be there at the right time, right place. And I just happened to have a YouTube channel and a site where I sell photos. You may have just crossed that line into commercial. Likewise, if you're just doing, say, work for like a church group or a charity fundraiser where you're helping them raise money by taking some pictures and then putting up to your site, that can be considered commercial. So it comes back to what's your intent.
Can you go over again the regulations for flying a drone in a neighborhood?
Yeah, so in a neighborhood, first and foremost is what is the airspace, okay? Is the airspace that you're going to be flying in restricted? So for example, out here in the Stillwater area, the airspace is pretty wide open. If I go into, say over St. Paul, Highland Park area, there's some areas over there where you may only be allowed to fly to 50 feet. There's some other neighborhoods right close by the airport that are at 0. So you can't even take off and fly and stay below the trees there. So you need to understand where that's at. But assuming that you can go up, that there's no airspace restrictions, then it just comes down to where are you going to fly and what are you going to fly over. In a neighborhood, I wouldn't sit there and hover over your neighbor's yard, your neighbor's house, especially, if you don't get along. That's probably not a good idea. But in a neighborhood, yeah, fly in your yard. You could fly in your yard, fly in your backyard. Watch out how many trees you have around. Get used to it. I always recommend go out, find a playground, a ball field, somewhere wide open where you can just go out and practice. Practice takeoff, hover, fly around, land, stuff like that. Just the basics. Learning how to control it, fly it, change angles, do some different things like that, and then come back in where you've got more trees, where you're more confined. But generally, not a lot of neighborhood restrictions, except for what you got to watch out for, like homeowners associations. Some HOAs, homeowner associations, may have restrictions, and more are starting to add them.
So your apps might not have the HOA, but places like Highland Park, where the restrictions are tighter near the airport,
Yeah,
apps
so
cover that?
like by Highland Park, I just use that one because I know some airspace over there, or over Lake Nokomis area. There's like a gradual stair step on how low or how high you can go closer into the airport. Downtown St. Paul is another good one. There's some airspace just on the east side of the Capitol, which is zero. You can't take off without a special authorization. On the west side of the Capitol, you could go up to 100 feet. So you have to know where those are. Those apps that I mentioned, UAV forecast, air map, before you fly, those will tell you what kind of airspace you're in. Likewise, the newer drones are pretty good about giving you warnings, unless you go in there and hack them and change them. They'll give you the warnings that you probably shouldn't take off here unless you have an authorization to fly in that area where you're not supposed to fly.
And we got a question again about the follow me mode when you are in the car.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that is, again, addressing that if you can have follow me on while you're in a car.
Yeah, so I mean, if you have somebody in the car with you who is operating the drone, or that could say, yes, this person is driving, this person is operating the drone, even in follow me mode, and you're out in a non-populated area, if you can look up through the sunroof and see the drone, you're probably good. Keep in mind, though, that part of why you don't want to be driving and flying is you may not pay attention to that power line that you're about to fly into. So again, it's some common sense.
Do you have any guidelines for using a drone at night? Are there different restrictions, different tips or tricks?
Yeah. Flying at night, I love flying at night. Back when I used to do a lot of scuba diving, I love night diving. It's just different. Here's what it is. For commercial, you are allowed to fly from 30 minutes before sunrise until 30 minutes after sunset. Beyond that, for commercial, you have to get a daylight waiver, an authorization, a waiver to be able to fly commercially at night. For recreational currently, that hasn't been closed yet, where you could still fly recreational at night. You just can't be doing commercial work while you're doing that recreational at night. But the big thing is you have to have lights that are visible from 3 miles away. So a lot of the drones will have that built in. To get the daylight waiver, you want to have extra lights on that are visible. So I have these. They're made by a company called Firehouse, and I don't know how that shows up on the screen, but these are very, very bright. They're very, very bright. They're really good. They're really small. They're self-contained. I get them either Firehouse or Firehouse via Amazon. I think they're about like $30. They're really affordable. Highly recommend them. The big thing at night is orientation, disorientation. There's that tendency to want to look at your app the whole time. Well, if your app fails on you, how are you going to get it back? Where is it going to go? So you lose a lot of things at nighttime that you don't have at daytime to see where you're flying, where it's going. Is the aircraft coming towards you, or is it going away from you? Which way is it going? All those different things change at night. But there's some things that you get to see at night that can make it worthwhile.
Are there any other drone accessories outside of the lights that you found particularly helpful?
Yeah, so absolutely the lights, spare batteries. All my kits, I have spare batteries. I have extra SD cards, micro SD cards. Tina, I use the prop guards because I fly Tina inside like factories and different places like that. Different cables. So for example, right now on this controller, I've got it set up with my phone, but I could put a tablet on it, but I would need to have a different cable. So have like your different cables for your different connectivities, whether it's an Android or an iPad. So like on this one here for Oscar, I actually have a iPad on it. So I need to have different cables, but I can swap this here phone out and put it on there and use that. So having your different cables, probably the biggest thing to have in your kit, whether it's a backpack, a pack, a hard case, is extra batteries. Extra SD cards, extra batteries.
What's the hardest thing, what's been the hardest thing for you to learn about drone operation?
Stay calm, relax, breathe. Remember to breathe. You can get in situations where you're like, what do I do now? What do I do now? Just stay relaxed, take a breath. One of the things I'll do is like if somebody's standing by, I'm paying attention, I'm watching, but I'll have a conversation with them, trying to engage them, show them where the aircraft is, so then they can actually help me keep track of it. And plus, you're more active to stay both engaged, stuff like that. Just stay relaxed, stay calm, use common sense, and don't stay glued to the screen. Be looking around, kind of like driving a car. You don't want to be glued to, you want to be, scan your instruments, what's going on outside, stay off the phone, but be looking around. Is that there's what's going on around the ground, but also up in the air and around. So it's just keeping all those things in perspective. Walking, talking, and chewing gum at the same time.
I think that covers all of the questions that we've had submitted so far, unless anyone's got anything extra to add here at the last minute. Do you have any last comments?
Yeah, you know what? Fly safe, fly smart, have fun, don't be a dummy. That's easy, you know, it's take that little bit of time, just fly smart, learn the local rules, the local regulations, and practice. I've got well over 1,000 flights, and I still practice takeoff, landing, just getting used to different things. What happens if this occurs, or what happens with that? Just practice, and then go from there. Have fun.
One final question. How many drones do you have?
Here I have 3.
How many total?
Working, retired, or all together?
All together. We want the total number.
Let's see. 1, 2, let's see, Pete, Nina, 4, 5, 6. We'll go with 6 if we don't count the singles.
All right. Sounds great. Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you, Jody, from the library, for setting this up. I really appreciate it. She's been in the background the whole time, so I just wanted to make sure I acknowledged her. And then we'll continue to have programs from the library all summer. We hope you can join us again in the future. Thank you, Greg.
Hey, thanks, everybody.